Of course, as part of feeding up information and problem solving and dealing with conflict, at times we have to resolve and escalate issues as they come out of our scope of authority or delegation. So, when issues are raised that require resolution, what we want to do is we want to follow a fairly robust problem solving approach, and that will lead to things like consistency in our behavior, and that'll give confidence to people around us that we've got a consistent process that we go through. But it'll just make sure that we're going through a rigorous, robust assessment of what the issues are. So we're trying to um, reduce as much subjectivity as possible and trying to be objective in the way that we go through these things. So there are some personal behaviors that we should lead in with. So first of all, if it involves people interpretations or people's explanations or perceptions of what happened, is making sure that we're asking the right questions, making sure that we're actively listening, so focusing on the content and the emotion. We're making sure that we're reflecting, so we rephrase, and in our own wording, we state what we think they just told us about the content, and we can confirm what we think that they're feeling in terms of their emotion, and that's going to give us the opportunity to confirm both the content and how they're feeling about it. If we're reflecting back in our own words what we think they've just told us, that'll give them the opportunity to go, yep, that's exactly right, or go, no, 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 you didn't, you missed this key point. Of course, we want to employ our emotional intelligence, and we've got a whole unit on emotional intelligence, but really about being aware of what emotions involved in this discussion and how we should be responding appropriately. And, and, and that's really about just making sure that we address the way that people feel and the way that they're connected to what the issue is. Because it's very difficult to get into an analytical problem solving approach if people are still feeling emotional, frustrated, angry, or whatever the case may be. So we making sure that we listen, making sure that we confirm it, making sure that we're using our emotional intelligence in terms of reading the room and then responding appropriately to that emotion that's involved. Once we've dealt with that, we can now start to become more analytical in the way that we go about that, making sure that we gather the facts, making sure that we consult with all the relevant parties and doing our research to get as much clarity around what happened as possible. And then, if required, providing open and honest feedback um, to determine the level of support and direction that is required from me. So, this is my understanding. This is my assessment of the situation. Is that correct? This is what I think based on what I've found out so far, and this is what I think I can do. What do you think I can do? How can I help with this situation? And this is where we start getting into things like brainstorming. We we go through a process of determining what the best course of action is to resolve the issue. We get everybody's buy-in and commitment. We've talked plenty about that. We set up some follow-up mechanisms to ensure that we can come back to see whether we're on track or see whether it's been successful or whether we need to tweak it or extend it or whatever the case may be. And then, of course, if if it falls outside of our scope, it's outside our scope, or it can still be inside our scope, but it's also within our manager's scope, or you know that it's an issue that your manager is um, highly interested in or has asked specifically to be kept in the loop about, then we've got to make sure that we feed it up. And we just talked about that, but making sure that we keep management in the loop or escalate it up if appropriate. So things like breaches of policy or procedure, issues outside of our own personal scope or within your manager's scope, um, issues that your manager has requested to know about. These are all the type of things that we would need to make sure that we escalate up. And again, as I was saying before, making sure that we put that in a documented form. So it might be you email them and then request a meeting to discuss it further, or you discuss it and then do a follow-up email with all the details in it. But making sure that you've got that documented trail behind you if it needs to be referenced back.